Rafe, it's all fallen apart rather suddenly, hasn't it, for Rishi Sunak? I mean, he hasn't been in long, but it's sort of, he started all right, I suppose, because everyone thought, well, he might be better than Liz Truss was, but it's all just disappeared. The floor has literally fallen away beneath him.
Yes, but the idea that there's anyone now waiting in the wings who can turn this around is for the birds. And that's why, you know, I mean, these Tory rebels are calling Sunak and his supporters delusional for thinking they can win the election. Well, I'm sorry, pot, kettle, black. They're just as delusional for thinking that they've got the ability to turn this old warhorse around. I mean, this warhorse is going off to the glue factory, let alone anywhere else. And the reason the Tories are going to face oblivion, you know, a near extinction-level defeat isn't because of Rishi Sunak, it's because they've betrayed the British public for well over a decade. They haven't delivered on their manifesto promises, and the public are tired of that. They've been dicing with death for 7 years now. Do you remember the last months of Theresa May's tenure? You know, the Brexit Party threatened to actually deliver a fatal blow and became the largest party in the European Parliament of all European nations. It was only Boris Johnson parachuting in that saved the Tories then, and there's no character like that today, apart from Boris Johnson himself. But he's a much more tarnished figure now than he was then.
Stephen Glover wrote a piece in the Mail today, didn't he, saying maybe Boris Johnson is the only man that can save them. But I think even now, at that point, because at least then there was Brexit to get done and you could sort of manufacture a campaign based on that. But they haven't really got anything they can manufacture a campaign on at all, which is puzzling to me as to why nobody decided to go along with Simon Clarke the other night.
Yeah, but you can't turn the supertanker around, and going with Simon Clarke, I think there is certainly an acceptance from many Conservatives I speak to that they're not going to win this election, but that is the point where they reform, they see which MPs are left, and that will absolutely be a major factor in terms of who the next leader is, because if you have, I think quite a lot of these red wall characters may go, MPs may go, and then you may have a Conservative Party actually quite similar to the one it was in maybe 2015, 2017, rather than 2019. And that could mean a whole lot of different things in terms of who the next leader is.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what about the Labour Party? You've been talking to them as well today. Tell us what they're up to.
Well, I sat down with Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, and they're talking about knife crime specifically today. The big question, of course, is they've got very ambitious plans. Yvette Cooper, unless there's a reshuffle, I think she's probably going to be the next Home Secretary. We'll see if Labour win, but it looks as if they will. But Yvette Cooper was talking about knife crime. She talked to me about immigration as well and a few other things. But really what they want to do is what the government has done, but further, faster, and in a much wider scope as well. But I put this question on knife crime to Yvette Cooper. This is what she had to say a little bit earlier today.
We want to get this focus on tackling knife crime to start early and to make a difference around knife crime. We want to get neighbourhood police back on the streets, and we want this action against the dangerous criminal gangs that are organising the boat crossings that are undermining our border security.
Well, the dangerous criminal gangs have been around almost as long as the Tory party have, haven't they? And
it's interesting.
A lot more successful.
I was at the Downing Street press conference last Thursday, this day last week, and Rishi Sunak was talking about the legislation there, which Yvette Cooper and her party voted against, which has put 837 gangmasters in prison serving time. I asked Yvette Cooper about that as well. I said, what's wrong with that legislation? She said, actually, the number has declined, so the legislation has to be changed again, in her view. But really, a lot of what Yvette Cooper wants to do, she talked to me as well about having youth workers in A&E, for example. I mean, a lot of that's just going to cost a lot of money. And where it's going to come from, we keep hearing about the non-doms money, we keep hearing about the private school money, possible windfall tax and so on. Well, actually, that costed manifesto that was being talked about a little bit earlier on, that's something that I think people are going to run a big slide rule over to see where's the money coming from, because if it's not coming from existing taxation, it can only come from borrowing or, of course, you and me as taxpayers.
Well, I mean, there is that worry, isn't there? I mean, here's an idea for them. Why don't you put some doctors in the A&E and then maybe they can actually see people who are going in with injuries?
That's a really important point, I think, because enough doctors in A&E that aren't running into your room and running out of your room. They do vital work. They separate children that are at risk from their parents and say, double check you're okay. They get men out of a room and say, I just need to speak to your wife who are showing signs of domestic abuse. So those youth workers that she's talking about, if we just got some doctors in A&E that were actually had time to do their job, a lot of these risk assessments could be done by a medical professional.
Also, by the time someone's stabbed, it's far too late. What's a youth worker going to actually solve in an A&E? Surely the process by which you stop people carrying knives and stabbing other people happens a lot sooner in the process.
And the problem with these knives is that they're very easily available, aren't they? Because Talk TV did an investigation, I think, last summer, Rafe, about how easy would it be to get a hold of one of these, because I was talking to people over the Christmas period. If you buy knives on the internet, you know, kitchen knives, they won't actually bring them to your house unless you sign the delivery that you've actually ordered them. But with these zombie knives, the people that are selling them, I mean, we were able to buy one on Facebook, I think, and it was delivered to a person at an address that hadn't given an ID.
Well, you know, with my think tank, we went to Norwich, and I happened to do a trip to Great Yarmouth to see what it was like down there, and I saw a very shady shop with just these very knives on display in the window, and I took a photograph. I couldn't believe about it. But to go to the broader point, I watched the clip that you did with Yvette Cooper, and what I found most telling isn't what she said, is what she didn't say. You know, there we saw her list her top 3 priorities: knife crime, police on the streets, and I forget what the third one is now, stopping the boats. No mention of legal immigration by the potential future Home Secretary. Just like Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges, 3 on the economy, 1 on the NHS, 5th one stopping the boats. The fact that neither the Labour Party nor the Tories understand that for the British voter, it's legal immigration that is the most pressing issue for public services and for cultural and social change. And of course, we can see quite clearly 50,000 illegal migrants a year is terrible. But we've had over 1 million legal immigrants with all of the implications that has. Right. And none of these parties seems to be brave enough to tackle that very issue.
The figure for 2022 is 745,000, but you're absolutely right, it is a massive...
Well, it's gross, not net. We must never use net figures.
Yeah, it's 1.2 million, isn't it?
Net figures always assume that those who've left the country are the same as those who've arrived.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about cultural change. And people who have left are very different. They're British people going to Canada, Australia, Spain. And those who are coming have very different values, and it'll take much more to integrate them into our society.
Yeah, because we keep hearing that we've got a falling birth rate and that we need to have more children, and yet the population continues to rise because more and more people are coming here. And also, the other thing is that one of my bugbears is the numbers of people coming to study, people coming on student visas. You know, that guy in Nottingham, who's just been sent down for manslaughter, the killing of those 3 people, he came here originally as a student and stayed, and an awful lot of them do. You know, and obviously they don't end up doing what he did, but what it means is that, you know, the myth is put out there by the government that people come here to study, they contribute loads of money into the economy, and then they leave. Well, a lot of them don't leave, and a lot of them bring their families with them, and that's why we've got so many people living here now.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, Mike, and I think there are real problems with this. It's a massive issue, and it's not racist to discuss it. It's practical, it's reasonable to discuss it. You've got, I mean, what I wanted to know from Yvette Cooper was at what stage do we, you know, what's a and I've never got an answer out of Labour for this. I interviewed Stephen Kinnock, one of our deputies, the shadow immigration minister at the weekend. I spoke to him for nearly 20 minutes, and I asked him a number of times and said, what is the level that you want? Is 745 okay? What about 500? Or we'll look at the numbers when we're in government. Well, by that stage, you know, the manifesto is too late. You need to put a number on it now. We need to be very clear what kind of people we want in this country as well. Not races or backgrounds or ethnicities or whatever. Not that, but literally, do we need more nurses? Okay, let's recruit some nurses. Do we need more doctors? Are there real, actual, tangible problems in our, 100,000 care workers, for example? Bring those people here. I think most people, some people will be happy, some people wouldn't be happy. I personally would be okay with that if there are genuine vacancies. But the problem for a lot of people, I think, is the fairness aspect around this. The fact that people
I'd like to see some political party coming out and actually admitting that we've got a huge number of people in this country who don't work, who go below the radar, who are antisocial, who are the sorts of people that are stabbing each other. And let's put them to work. Let's give them something to do and somehow solve the crime problem while at the same time solving the unemployment problem.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great idea to me.
But one of the reasons we think Keir Starmer hasn't given us a number is because, of course, he's aware of quite how radical his MPs are when it comes to immigration. We know from all the evidence that Tory MPs are to the left of voters on immigration. So if Tory MPs are to the left, you can only imagine how far left radical Labour MPs will be.
Absolutely right. Well, good to see you.